which I can remember so clearly, all these lessons from. There's some segments that sort of stay with you in terms of ATMs in your training and others that don't. This one stayed clearly with me because I can remember all this press and lift. I had no idea. I had no idea what he was talking about. But it was through doing the approximations that I did understand that even though I couldn't get the feeling that I knew he was after, that it was enough that I was exploring, that I was beginning to sense what I did, how I did it, that could begin to refine this very deep understanding of how we use the ground. So as you're lying, what do you recall of the lesson yesterday that we started this series of this gentle flexing of your fingers? What comes back to you? And again, really notice, is it something in your thinking that comes back? It's an idea that we were playing around with or that you were interested in? Is it a sensation? Something you felt through yourself or sensed through yourself, through all your sensory systems, that something was lighter or easier, or maybe you got a sense of I could feel or sense more of myself in my image, or my leg got lighter. Maybe it's more a feeling, more emotion of when you got frustrated, or all of a sudden everything seemed really clear. Or maybe it was a movement itself that you remember, or a sequence of movements doing them. So begin to gently flex and extend the fingers of your right hand. And again, take your time to really feel, is your focus more on the flexing or the extending? Which one requires a little bit more effort for you? The opening a little bit of your fingers or the curling of your fingers? And this is what I love about what Feldenkrais does. He generalizes learning, because you're really going to explore in this lesson this idea of press and lift, but in really non-habitual positions. So that we're constantly taking an understanding that we have and applying it in another orientation, in another way that we know ourselves. And see if you can find, as you continue this gentle flexing and extending, that you can find a range where it's just as easy to flex as it is to extend. So this very simple movement is really about how you organize all of your flexors and extensors, not just the ones in your fingers, not just the ones in your hand, but that this ability to flex or extend tells you a lot about how you organize this throughout yourself, whether you tend to push on the extension or pull on the flexion, Because if there is effort, if there is a push or a pull there, those muscles that you're organising here are saying to you, I'm not as coordinated as I could be in this ability for one, the agonist and the antagonist, to be responsive to each other. So really seeing, can I find that range where it's just as easy to flex my fingers a little as to open them. And what's this ability to organise our flexors and extensors in this way from our dominant hand for most of us? That has a huge impact on our cortex, on our intentional cortex, on our premotor cortex. That gradually allows you to feel, as you can reduce the effort, find the ease, that is it easier for your attention to start to spread a little more? So that all your attention doesn't have to be on this flexing and extending of your fingers, but maybe at the same time, because this is so effortless, it's not a big focal point in your brain, that you can feel your contact with the ground. You can get a sense of your shape. You can sense how it influences your breathing, that your breathing can become more effortless. That your head could roll really easily. And as you do this seemingly innocuous movement, to look at this really fundamental organisation, that you can begin to get this sense maybe of length and width, space internally. So you've got room to spread your attention. But this gentle alternating of the flexors and extensors isn't taking you into that place that so many people describe as, if you like, relaxation, where you've just sort of gone heavy on the ground. So that's never what we mean if we talk about relaxation. We're always looking for a more potent state. Okay, so now gently keep that movement going and find a way to roll on to your right side again into that same position we were in yesterday, with your left arm and leg resting on the floor in front of you, and your right arm just somewhere where you can keep this movement gently going, where your fingers aren't resting on the floor. That's your only constraint, that your fingers aren't resting. And notice the shape that you make today after having done that really gentle flexion and extension is different to where you were yesterday. So your forearms on the ground, your knees on the ground. And again, just notice, is that a different shape for any of you than where you were yesterday? Is there something about that after doing this very gentle movement, your torso could be in a little bit more neutral state? So really notice at the moment where your head is in relationship to your pelvis. Is it in line with your pelvis? Is it in front of your pelvis? Is it behind your pelvis? And what I'd suggest as this lesson goes on, because we're looking to evoke a particular organisation here, is that some of you could explore allowing your head to come more forward in space. So your right hands are never stopping this movement. It's very gentle, flexing and extending. And begin to turn your head a little bit toward the ceiling. Again, really notice how you do that. Where does that movement begin? So your head just turns a little bit toward the ceiling. And you feel what mobilizes in you to do that. How much of you feels ready to respond to that movement? Again, don't make it respond, but just feel at the moment. How much through all of me do I feel that is ready to respond to this very small movement of turning my head toward the ceiling? And you've got many ways of tracking that. You've got your breathing. You've got how your weight might be rolling across your underneath surface. And as much as you can, try not to roll over the back of your arm while you're doing this lesson. And then leave your head and begin to think of turning your pelvis. You could think of your pubic bone maybe turning. So what do you think of when I say your pelvis? Turning to face the ceiling. How much is in your image? Which parts of your pelvis feel ready to turn? And how would your head maybe respond to this? And again, how do you find that? How are you mobilizing your intention here? So again, it's not important if you can do the movement, but how you mobilize your intention. So that there's never any push. And is it possible to mobilize your pelvis without your head having to do anything? And I don't mean that you're going to hold your head stiff, but that it could just stay a little bit more still so that your head doesn't immediately have to move, but maybe something could change shape in your torso to roll your pelvis. Something could be happening in the underneath hip, in your low back. And you might begin to find that as you roll your pelvis back, that your left knee begins to lift a little bit away from the floor, but don't make it happen. Watch your breathing, that your breathing stays effortless, that your fingers keep moving. Because they're immediately going to tell you if your effort increases. And then a few times, could you roll your pelvis and your head a little bit in the direction of the ceiling? Again, what we're interested in here is the mobilizing. And your ability to keep this small, to keep this really looking at how you mobilize your intention into action, can later in the lesson become really powerful in how you imagine this movement. And maybe if you keep it really small and you feel that your head and pelvis are both rolling a little bit to the ceiling, and you can feel your left knee begins to lift a little bit away. You might be feeling your left elbow lifts a little bit away. And notice your timing. Does your head do more than your pelvis? Does your pelvis do more than your head? So that you can get a sense that all of you, that your pelvis and your head do the same amount. But don't be concerned if they don't. You're simply noticing what becomes lighter for me first, my elbow or my knee? Which do I know more about organising? So maybe as you continue to roll and you find a way that your elbow and knee begin to lighten, that maybe if you're really finding this response that we're looking for in this lesson, you might feel that something begins to lift as well, maybe in your foot or your hand. And again, this might make more sense for some of you than others. But could you begin to feel, to mobilize this? And we'll observe some people in a minute. Depending on the shape you're making, your starting position on the floor, could you begin to feel that as your leg lifts, your belly pulls in a little bit? Your chin goes a little bit down. Keep your fingers going. Jane goes, oh, yes. Keep your right fingers going. So many things are involved in this, finding this ability to roll softly and lightly. Roll onto your back. Fingers still going, fingers still going. And just see if after doing that, is anything changed in the way you're using your fingers at the moment after that exploration? Has anything changed in the quality of that movement? Have you learnt something from doing those movements? Okay, come up to sitting. Just going to get the skeleton. And see, why has he got you in this position? Why in this position to explore? And let's see how it's influenced by where you are. So, we started off lying on the side. Lying on the side with both knees bent up. That's where we started initially yesterday. Yeah? And we had this arm up. And again, can you see how that would be a really different position to be in, to bring your arm, your hand we started with, forward on the floor? Yeah. Than that position with the arm up there. Yeah? So which one would make it easier that the fingers weren't touching the floor, do you think? Try it. Your fingers weren't touching the floor. Yeah, for your fingers not to touch the floor. When your arm was more forward and your head was forward. So it's already going to have an influence on it, isn't it, where you are? Yeah. So that's just a question in itself when you're going through these ATMs. Why does he do this? Why is he getting us in particular positions? So then what he does is he says, move your shoulder forward and back a little bit. And could you bring, keeping, and he's, you know, we've already done a little bit of the finger flexion. Could you do that and allow this arm to come reaching forward on the floor? So what shape would you expect that to pull you into? More of a flexion. Huh? There's a lot of you who it didn't flex more. Huh? Because it's really easy that I can be, if I love being extended, so I love being extended, which my hand's free, and so I just do that. But my breathing has been interfered with here. And this isn't just my organisation, but what is it that he started with this, to start to roll your weight a little bit forward and back, and then says from that position, could you take your elbow forward? So just try it on yourselves. So it doesn't mean, I'm not saying people will get it, but if we can look at the structure of the lesson, and you can be an extension or flexion. So he starts with this ability to take your shoulder a little bit forward and back. Oh, you're such a good example. Okay. Keep going and then I'll show you. Mm-hmm. Can you feel where it could take you? When it won't take you there, do you mind if I use you as an example for a second? Yeah. Can I use you as an example? Use you as an example. Yeah? So if when I say to someone, move the shoulder forward and back, what's moving her shoulder forward and back? It's not her shoulder. There's nothing really changing in the relationship of her shoulder girdle over her chest. Huh? It's much more that I'm taking my shoulder forward by rolling all of me forward, and I'm taking my shoulder back by rolling all of me back. Huh? So what's the difference if I take my shoulder? It's a differentiated movement, but all of me is still in the image. So it's that difference between, I'm not stopping all this and doing that. That's never what we're looking for in Feldenkrais, because there I've stopped everything from moving to get the differentiation. So that's associated with me holding my breath, with fixing my neck. So differentiation is always about something staying still, not held, not stuck, but simply, I've still got all of me in my image, but I'm choosing at the moment to do less, much less movement with my pelvis. Much less movement. Does that distinction make sense? It's a really important one, because people very quickly get into stopping, sticking everything rather than feeling that they're exploring differentiation within a whole system. Hmm. Hmm. But it's still you doing the movement. Yeah, you've never taken out you of the movement. Yeah? So to be the same in FI, if I was here, that if I was just thinking of the shoulder forward back, and I can say, oh, she does it beautifully. Huh? But there's not a lot of differentiation happening in her shoulder. But all of her is in there. That's fantastic. So I'm just going to use a hand just to say, this can stay a little quieter. And what could you do here? And I can see, she still likes to move that. Could we keep this just a little quieter and see what happens here? So I'm not stopping her. I'm just saying this can stay a little bit quieter while you find some of these movements of your shoulder. She loves it. So now if she takes her shoulder forward, that's a really different place to do the lesson from. Yeah. Can you feel that's really different, Sylvia? Yeah. And the leg forward is the same thing. Huh? Because again, if I said take your leg forward, Sylvia, she would do all of her. And this is where it gets really interesting. Do you know what I mean? Because the whole thing, it's these conceptual ideas again. We want everything, but we want every bit to be doing its bit within that everything. So our first approximation is to get everything there. Just for people to feel flow and to feel all of themselves. And then we want to see, can we start to break it down a little bit for them? So if we leave that forward and we bring this back. So now I'm going to keep this still for her, just still a little bit, and bring your leg back again. Yeah? And we're going to show her, how could this go forward? Hey. Because by doing that, she's got a lot more differentiation in her torso. So finding this lightness in our arms, in our legs, making distinctions, allows to become more available for movement. So if you did the movement from there now of lifting, turning your head a little bit, does that feel different? Because now she's engaging her flexors. Huh? To do this. And remember, with the anatomy, we've got it's the belly that gives us so many more possibilities to organize our ribs and our pelvis, not the extensors. The extensors are much more about getting all the little spinal movements, but it's the belly that does the big mobile movements. But it's got to be soft. It's got to be available. And now you're going to lift your neck. And now her head starting to pull down. Can you feel the difference? Yeah. So if we put it back where you started, Sylvia, where this all went forward just as one big piece, this went forward as one big piece, you can see her breathing is compromised already. This can't breathe now. Yeah? And her fingers, I can guarantee you, will not be as soft as when we got her into that other position. Yeah? So again, he's working with, which he did a lot in the first, he's really going, I'm going to get you in a position where hopefully you can give up some of your habitual anti-gravity response, which for most of us is in our extensors. I'm going to get you into a position where you can begin to feel press and lift without this. Because most people thrust with their extensors. So you'll see it. You know, if you've got someone on an unstable balance beam, they don't go down when they're unstable. They thrust up. No? That's extensors. Flexors are in, but it's extensors thrusting us up. You know, that's the thrust reaction that we have from really that extensor startle pattern is what we do from when we're born, which is what babies do, the startle. It's all extent. I mean, the belly tightens, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's... Yeah, so there's no reason. He doesn't say where your arm could be. Your arm could be there. And play around with, is it where my arm is? Because this is an even better position, because feel how many more of your ribs are on the ground now, Sylvia? Yeah. Whereas here, none of these ribs are touching. None of them. Can you feel that? She's much more likely to get a dead arm here. No? Here, because she's got so much more contact with the ground, much less likely that she'll get a dead arm there. Look at your setup. Because again, all it's saying is that in that place, you can't get over your hip joint. Now, whereas look how light that is now. No? And then she could also maybe learn to do it by, which we were doing yesterday in the first lesson, maybe her knee could also come that way and get light. She could use a flexion pattern. Remember the lesson we started with yesterday about bringing the elbow and knee together and, yeah, taking them apart. And it's really is your pattern to use your extensors to open out? Is that what you understand? Is your pattern to use your flexors, that it's easier for you to come together? And of course, we want all of them. We want all of them. That you could do it with extension, you could do it with flexion. But all of them are soft and mobile. So it's going to be very different if I'm here and I'm extended, but I'm extended. No? No? Because there, I'm going to have to press into the ground because none of this is soft. So once I find the softness there, I can extend to roll onto my back. No? Because I've got all of this ability to shift my weight. But he's definitely taking us in this position. And as, you know, I left you to it yesterday, you know, where were you? But if you can begin to look at what's the thinking behind what he's doing, not just what are the movements, but what's he trying to evoke in someone's organisation? What's he giving us the opportunity to explore? Mm. 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 To put the leg there. Mm. Once you rotate your pelvis, that's going to help you to lighten your leg on the ground. No, because your knee's light. Yeah. But if we put you in a position where this leg was heavy, yeah, so your leg's incredibly light at the moment after everything we've done. But let's just disconnect it a little bit. Okay, there you go. Now roll your pelvis and see how it's not ready to lift. it goes, you have to go a lot further, and you're holding your breath and your fingers have stopped. Oh, made a leg heavy. She'll find it. She'll find it. I disconnected her. So I wasn't thinking of parts joining together. I was thinking of, if you like, differentiating but disconnecting. So all I was thinking about was a hip. Not her hip in relationship to all of her. Yeah, and the constraint was this. So just to get into that starting position, you would have already lost some of this, the ease of that. And that's what he's getting at. Do you know, that's why these lessons are so powerful, and I'd really recommend just keep doing them. Honestly, the levels of organisation that you can find. And as I said, you know, my thing is, people will never get this. They don't have to. You know, it's just I'm showing you what could be if you really looked at the ideal. But people are always still going to learn, whatever their level is of So with Sue, it's the breathing makes more sense that she can pay attention to. This is a really new one for a lot of people, to have that quality of movement in their fingers.
So that and it was really making my ear ache. So I could feel it. Just when we stopped, I could feel the quality in my hand changing, and that was getting less. I don't know.
And that's the profound part about it, you know, because if you just think, that's separate, you know, I'm doing this, and this is how we learn. Am I just doing this? Or is that part of me? Is that gentle movement so that I can begin to feel, and I'm not making it happen, but there's a whole pulse begins to happen through my flexors and extensors, which I can't remember who was talking about yesterday that they felt. Was it Jane? Someone here was saying that they'd done the lesson. Linda, that they'd done this and they could really, I can't remember, but was it Linda? It was someone who said that I could feel it for a couple of days. That was you, Jane. Yeah? So you generalised that quality into everything you did. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. So I know that if that happened, all of you wasn't in the image. As the practitioner, I know that, you know, it's something about the way you're moving your attention. It's something about that I got too caught up in it and in my habit of doing it. And that's why he does choose the right hand, because most people are right-handed, and so they've got usually more bigger area on their cortex. But it's such a big thing to get to this place where it's me doing the movement. That's huge. It's not my fingers, it's me. You could, I don't think, you know, we're going to transfer it. But, you know, that whole idea, it's me. How long does it take us to get to that? And you're all in approximation stage, you know, and you'll have those moments where everything just feels so easy. That's when all of you is in your image. And you're not using this thinking brain to break you up into parts, but you're sensing. Yeah. And they're the patterns, and I think I talked about this last time, my thinking, because our habits of thinking are just as profound as anything else. So if my habit of thinking is to do this, so how do I find that I can think and my head is free and my fingers are free and I can move my chest and my breathing's soft and I can move on the ground and I'm still thinking. Thinking isn't this. I think anything to do with flexors and extensors is very profound. But all of it comes from here, Helen, that they're organising this through their whole being. Yeah? It organises our flexors and extensors. That's what I'm saying. It generalises too. Do you know what I mean? He's really looking at keeping moving something you got here into this. These are not all separate lessons. Huh? We're just building on ideas, but ideas in the form of sensation.
You'll move your knee whether your fingers are flexed or extended, and then he tells you they're flexed. Then he tells you later that they're flexed. I was trying to work out the breathing, though. I could get that. I could get the fact that they're flexed. But when he said, "Now pay attention to your breathing when you move,"
and she stopped. Can you see?
Yeah, that's why I probably I couldn't get it.
But that's just it. Your habit of attending is the problem. And it's not the problem, but it's how you attend when you think there's a challenge there. Huh? That's what we're playing with here.
I was wanting the answer, actually, but that's why I was concentrating really hard.
But there's the concentration. Look, the eyes screw up because I'm trying to get it now. I'm trying, and you can see her thinking, her habit of thinking. Huh? We all do it. Something's hard. You know, whether it's we crease up around our eyes or we hold our jaw or...
Because if it's only in your thinking, it's still...
You're still in your habit.
Habit to be in this world, I mean, yeah.
So there's habits, as he says, in all of them, in our thinking, our sensing, our feeling and our acting. But that his belief was that acting was the easiest way to begin to change it. Because that's what we're doing with people. We're making them aware of what they're doing. But it's not just about making us aware of what we're doing. So this one's very much intention action, but we're making them move themselves in very different ways and many different orientations, and so that they have to experience themselves in ways that they don't normally do. But this, to me, is the depth of the work. This is what we're heading toward.
And then to become the observer of that.
Now your eyes are softer. That's it, Jane. And then when I think about it, and I've got my eyes closed, but I can still feel where all of you are in the room. Huh? I can still feel where I am in the room. But all of that takes time to build up all of those connections in the brain. So, do you want to just try that again, and then we'll have a little break and come back to it? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, for you, it's more flexed.
Yeah, it's more flexed. Yeah. And if I flexed more, then it comes back just naturally.
That's where you'd stay.
Or if I extend, it comes back. No,
naturally. Because what did you do when you extended?
Okay, it means I really need to flex, and it comes back without the effort. And okay.
Yeah, because so most people, the effort will be on the extension. So, you know, just to go over this, so your extensors, everything has tonic muscles, which are the anti-gravity muscle fibres. But it's much quicker. We can use our flexors quicker. Yeah, we can do that much quicker than we can do that. So our flexors
and
fire
then it
quicker.
Comes back just naturally.
Yeah. Than our extensors, because our extensors are already helping to hold us up. They're working a little bit. But if they if you just overwork your extensors, so if you just really tighten in your back, what's happened to this then? You want to extend more. Yeah? If I tighten my belly, I want to flex more. It's, you know, and that's how this work is so profound, because you think, how could this be telling me about someone's organisation? It tells me everything about someone's organisation. Okay. I think the thing is, he never explains any of this, really. Yeah. So just try it again. How do you get into that right side lying position? Feel how you could get there at the moment by feel the freedom in your shoulder. So over on your right sides, and how do you get that your left arm and left leg forward so that you can feel you haven't compromised your breathing, your shoulder blade is free. So it's always levels of approximation. It's always, oh, I've got it. I have to use all of me. That's what our brain does. It wants to understand something. Or it wants to get there where it's good enough, I think. Oh, I've got that now. But how do we keep exploring that? How do we keep looking at it? And just see what it's like now to begin to roll your head and your pelvis together. Begin to roll. You can even, you know, he does these other lovely little movements which we'll do before you get up, where instead of lifting your knee, what would happen if you lifted your foot? So you're just lifting your foot. And lift your knee. Really easily, keeping your right hand moving. And feel how that shifts your weight a little bit differently on your ribs. So doing something as simple as that. So it's not really about lifting your foot and lifting your knee and alternating. It's saying to do this, you have to organise to shift your weight differently through the middle. You have to find other ribs. You have to find parts of yourself. And then you could lift your elbow and put it down, or lift your hand and put it down. And feel how that shifts your weight again a little bit differently. It's going to ask different parts of you, because he's really interested in increasing your contact with the ground. And then maybe you could keep your knee and your elbow down and lift your hand and your foot. Just see, does that? Can you not hold your breath to do that? Can you still find a different shape, a different place to shift your weight to? All of these seemingly simple movements that you're doing. It's how do I understand that these are coming back to the basics of shifting weight, of including all of my, finding more of myself in my image. And then again, feel, could you begin to lift maybe everything together? And again, look at that intention into action. Don't just do it, or do it if you must, but notice, where did I hold? What did I do? Where did I push? So that I just keep rolling across the ground. Nothing pushes. Everything just keeps moving. Different parts of me press into the ground, roll into the ground. The ground is my friend. It's soft, giving. And feel all of those underneath parts of you, especially for some of you in your ribs, that can begin to find a way to roll and to make contact with the ground. And roll to your back. Find a really easy way. Come up to standing. Is your fingers still going? So, are you beginning to get a sense of all the things that are involved in this ability to feel that life can be a bit easier and lighter? And it's not about changing our thinking in terms of, oh yeah, life's easy and light. But how do we have a sense of that in our action? And feel if you very gently come back to that flexing and extensing of your right fingers, or the opening and closing, would it be different how you would take a step than maybe what you would normally do? Maybe you'd shift your weight differently. Maybe it's for some of you that you just feel, oh, more of me understands what I'm doing. More of me is in my image of what I'm doing. And the really lovely thing is, as we get this anti-gravity response more, that your eyes are freer. Just do to see. They're not working to hold you up, to tell you where you are in space, which is what happens to so many people as they get older. And they get anxious about falling. And they rely on their eyes more and more and more. So can you get a sense of doing this, that it's easier to feel, oh, I've got feet on the ground. The different sensory systems are giving me information. I've got more sense of all of me. My head is quite free. And we'll take our morning break and come back and do a little bit more.